When I originally got the idea to make this video, I was going to give it a very clickbaity title, like, I created the most epic VPN of all time. But then I realized that I really don't need to do that. I can just put the software stack in the title, and those people who know better are going to realize that, yeah, this is going to be a pretty awesome VPN. Now, if you aren't familiar with the software in the title, what I'm going to be doing is creating a VPS and then installing OpenBSD to it, which is a very secure Unix-like operating system, probably one of the most secure server operating systems in the world. And most importantly, it has a secure by default design. If you were to compare it to an Ubuntu server, for example, yeah, Ubuntu is still pretty good, but anytime you're going to use it or Debian, any other stock Linux server OS, there's usually a lot more work that you have to do after you install it to harden the installation. And a lot of the steps to do this are things that most web developers might not be aware of, but they really should be, because if you're going to have a box out there on the internet that anybody can scan, anybody can enumerate, you really want to make sure that the entire software stack you're using on there is ironclad. But especially the operating system. You want to make sure that it is locked down, and OpenBSD provides you that by default. Now, WireGuard is a fairly new VPN protocol that has a lot of advantages over other protocols like OpenVPN, for example. And most of these advantages come from the fact that WireGuard's implementation, the source code of the protocol, is very, very simple, and the protocol itself is very, very simple. So this allows WireGuard, for example, to be much, much faster than OpenVPN. And some people also consider it to be a lot more secure than OpenVPN, because with the smaller code base, there's a much smaller attack surface, at least for the protocol itself. But it is worth mentioning that WireGuard is new, so it hasn't been tested as much as OpenVPN. There aren't as many security experts that have looked at it. Even though the source code of WireGuard is much smaller than OpenVPN's, not as many people have actually audited the source code itself. So keep that in mind. It might be possible that some bugs are found in WireGuard later on, but most people, and myself included looking at it right now, think that it's a really solid protocol. It's also worth mentioning that WireGuard by default doesn't include any ways to obfuscate the fact that you're using WireGuard. So say, for example, somebody is sniffing your traffic, they wouldn't be able to see the actual contents of the traffic. You know, that's going to be in an encrypted tunnel thanks to WireGuard, but they could tell that you are using WireGuard. And so if you're in a situation where, say, you're trying to use a VPN, but maybe you're trying to hide from your network administrator or your ISP or somebody like that, that you're using a VPN, then WireGuard might not be a really great protocol for that. OpenVPN does have options to obfuscate your traffic though. But the main reason that I'm setting this up is for an additional security layer for me to SSH into web servers. So basically the idea is just restrict the SSH connection of those servers to only accept connections from the VPN. And then, of course, also using public-private key pairs with my SSH connection as well. But now let's go ahead and dive right into the configuration. So when you're in Vultr, you're actually able to deploy an OpenBSD 7.1 Cloud Compute VPS for as little as $6 a month. And I think you can actually use an even cheaper one if you do, let's see, I think it's this one, Intel Regular Performance. Yeah, so you can do an even cheaper option, but I prefer this one. They're AMD high performance because you get an NVMe SSD with that. So I've just found in my own testing that it deploys boxes a little bit quicker. And you've also got the AMD EPYC CPUs being used. I mean, it's a shared CPU, so there's probably not a huge difference there, but it's not that expensive to set up your own VPS. And you could also use my affiliate link for Vultr in the description of this video to save some money when you're setting up your own VPS when you use it. And it also gives me a little bit of a kickback, so I really appreciate that. Now, after your OpenBSD box is provisioned and you're able to ping the IP address for it, you want to go ahead and SSH into it as root. And there's a couple of changes that you want to make for any fresh OpenBSD box. First is probably change the root password from whatever Vultr set it to. Then you want to create a regular user, regular non-root user, and you're going to also want to add them to the wheel group so that they can use SU, and you might also want to go ahead and set up do as, but I just add my users to the wheel group so that I can do SU for my BSD boxes. And then you want to generate an SSH key pair on your local machine, and then you're going to want to copy the contents of the public key file into the authorized key file under that new user that you just created. And once you've gone ahead and configured your new user, you want to go ahead and SSH into your OpenBSD box as them, and then use SU to become root. And then you want to edit your etc ssh sshd config file. And there's a couple of changes that we need to make in here. So first thing we want to do is uncomment the permit root login line and change this from yes to no. So this is going to prevent you from being able to SSH directly as the root user. You're going to have to go in as a regular user and then use SU to become root, a regular user that's in the wheel group, of course. And then you want to make sure that your authorized key file points to .sh/authorized keys. You also want to make sure before you leave this box that you actually have your authorized keys in the right place. So that's going to be in home Kenny or whatever the name of your user is, .sh authorized key. So you want to make sure that this matches that public key that you generated on your local machine. And we'll go back into this. And the last thing that you need to change is uncomment the line that says password authentication. By default, it's going to say yes. You want to uncomment and then change it to no. So that's going to force you to use SSH keys when you log in. And then you want to right quit that file, and then you want to run etc rc.d sshd restart to restart the SSH service. And then the next time that you go to log in, it's going to require you to use that key file. And this should also go without saying, but back up your private SSH keys. If for some reason something goes wrong, you lose the key, you can always just access Vultr through this console here, and then you can go ahead and fix anything you need to fix. Now let's go ahead and set up WireGuard with pkg add WireGuard tools to install it. And next we need to allow forwarding on our server interface. So we'll do sysctl net.inet.ip.forwarding equals 1. And you can see that I already have it set here, but on your machine, this is going to go from 0 to 1. And you can also do the same thing for IPv6 if you're going to use that. So it would be net.inet6, IP6, and then same thing, forwarding equals 1. And then you see how it changes on my system. But you don't need to do IPv6 if you're not going to be using it. And then next, we need to also write this configuration to etc sysctl.conf. So go ahead and do this command. And then same thing for IPv6 if you're going to use it, inet6, IP6. And then if we go into our etc sysctl.conf, it's going to look like this. Well, I duplicated it, but this is how it's going to look. Now we're going to create a directory for WireGuard, and I think I did this already. Yes, I did. CD into your WireGuard folder. And now we're going to create a public-private key pair. So similar idea to what we did with securing our SSH connection. Instead of using passwords with WireGuard, we're going to use key pairs, which I would say is more secure than a password, because typically if a password is easy to remember, then it's also easy to guess or easy to crack. It might literally be in a password list that hackers are using to brute force your system. But no one's ever going to be able to crack someone's private key. You would have to actually hack their computer and then steal that private key file from them. So we're going to generate that private key here on BSD. So we'll do WG gen key, and I'll call it private.key. And then I'll use that private key to create the public key with WG pub key, private.key, and then public.key. All right, so I've got this private key and this public key here now. And then I'm going to create a configuration file for WireGuard. So I'll touch, actually I'm already in the directory, so I'll just touch wg0.conf. And you can call this whatever you want. As you'll see on my client machine, I'm going to give it a different name. And then let's go ahead and open wg.conf. So this WireGuard configuration is just a client peer setup. Might be a little bit confusing at first, but it's pretty simple once you wrap your head around it. So down here is the peer info. We're not going to really do anything with that yet. Right now, we're just going to configure our interface. So private key is going to be that private key that we just generated. So we'll go ahead and bring that into the file. Listen port. So by default, it's 51,820, but it can be whatever you want it to be. And in fact, we can do some really basic obfuscation by changing this to something like 443. So if somebody was inspecting our traffic and just doing a really basic light inspection, they might not know right away that we're using WireGuard. They might think that this encrypted connection over 443 is just HTTPS. Now, this isn't a very serious obfuscation technique because anyone inspecting the packets is still going to be able to tell that it's WireGuard because WireGuard has a pretty unique handshake. But hey, we'll just do 443 for now, and it'll be less obvious just by looking at the port that we're using WireGuard. But if you do want to actually obfuscate your WireGuard connection, you might want to look into something like shadow socks. I haven't really messed with this myself, but it's supposed to obfuscate the fact that you're using VPNs, and it can help you bypass firewall restrictions if your network admin is trying to prevent you from using VPNs. But obfuscation isn't really necessary for what I'm going to be doing here, because ultimately I'm just using this kind of a VPN setup to further secure an SSH connection to a web server. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'll just change the allowed IPs here to 0.0.0.0/0. So any peer is going to be able to connect, of course, as long as their public key is added into my configuration file, which we're going to do in a little bit. So I will right quit this for now. And now we need to configure our firewall in etcpf.conf. And what we're just going to go ahead and do here is we're going to add in these 3 lines. So pass in on WG, pass in inet, proto, UDP from any to any port, and you want to make sure that this port here matches the same one that you just put in your WG0.conf, so 443 for me. And then it's going to NAT to our public interface. So you want to make sure that it actually is VIO 0. So I can do that real quick to show you. I should probably shrink this a little bit so it doesn't look so crazy. All right, so you can see VIO 0 right here. So this is my public IP. I should be able to curl ifconfig.me. Oh, I don't have curl added. Well, let's go ahead and do that then. Okay, so you can see same IP address here. So that way it's going to allow our WireGuard connection to actually route to the internet. So, most likely your interface is going to be VIO 0, but you just want to make sure. And once your firewall configuration is done, we'll go ahead and restart the firewall pfctl f etc pf.conf. And now we need to create a hostname file for WG0, or whatever name you gave it, in our etc directory. So we just vim etc hostname, and you can see that we already have one for VIO 0, which is just going to be DHCP, and then we've also got the inet6. Actually, I think this is only here because I did that IPv6 configuration, which, like I said, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. But anyway, we're going to do one now for WG0. And inside of there, we're going to paste in these lines. And I'll go ahead and explain what's going on. So you need to specify a private IP address range. And it doesn't really matter which one you use. It can be 10.0.0.0, 192.168. But you're going to need to remember what IP address you put here for this one. So like I'm just doing 10.0.0.1. And then you're going to have to use a different IP from the same subnet for each of your clients. So this is really simple if you're just doing like a peer-to-peer configuration like I'm doing here, just put like 10.0.0.2 in the other one. Really straightforward, but this is one thing that can be a little bit of a pain, all this like subnetting you have to do when you're gonna have a bunch of different WireGuard clients, but again, that's beyond the scope of this video. So we've got that set up, and then we can start our WireGuard interface with sh etc net start wg0. And oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even done the peer configuration. Okay, let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so go ahead and open another tab in your terminal for your client device and just go ahead and become root real quick. Now, I'm using Linux, and I assume that's what most of y'all watching this are running as well. But if you're running a BSD client, then the configuration is going to be pretty similar, but there are going to be some differences. Like you're going to have to also on your BSD client change your hostname.wg or whatever. There's a couple other differences between doing this with Linux and BSD, but there are tons of guides when I was researching this for BSD to BSD WireGuard configurations. And plus, if you're running BSD on the desktop, then you're a lead hacker anyway, so this should be a breeze for you. But here on Linux, or at least on Arch, you want to install WireGuard tools. So same package name as OpenBSD. And once that's installed, you want to go ahead and create the etc WireGuard folder if it doesn't exist already, and then cd into that. I'm actually in a test folder within WireGuard, and this is just so that I don't accidentally mess anything up with my actual configuration or show one of my private keys by mistake. So, speaking of private keys, let's go ahead and generate our public-private key pair with this command. And that goes ahead and creates both of them. Actually, I'm going to move this private file, rename it to private.key, just so it's following the same convention here. And then we're going to create a configuration file. I'm just going to call mine wgtest.conf. And so go ahead and vim into that, and we'll paste in our template, which again is pretty much following the same idea as the template here. It's just we're reversing things. So the private key here, just like it says in the comment, is going to be the client private key. So I'll do R. Actually, I can make this a little bit bigger. And what is it? Private.key. And go ahead and delete that. Then just bring that private key up here. Okay, and then this address, actually I need to put an equal sign here. So this address, 10.0.0.2/24, just like what I was talking about over here with, what was it? Etsy host name.wg0. So same idea, but you want to make sure it's in the same subnet, but a different IP address. So this was 10.0.0.1. This one will be 10.0.0.2/24. And then our server public key. So we can actually go and let's see, what directory am I in? Let's go to, let's see, WireGuard, and we'll cat out the server's public key. And paste that in. And we also need to give the server our public key. So let's do cat public.key. Copy this. And that's not the file. Just do this. All right, and post it here. Delete that. All right, and let's see, is there anything else I need to change in here? Let's see, we got 000, listen port is correct, private key, public key, persistent keep alive. Okay, this looks good. And let's see about here. Okay, so I actually need to just copy this whole line. Persistent keep alive, that just helps with making sure the connection doesn't drop on you. And let's see, oh, endpoint. Okay, so that's gonna be the public IP address of this box. So we'll just do curl ifconfig.me, copy this, and we'll come up here, paste that in. And let's see, anything else that I'm missing? Just delete that since I'm not using IPv6. And yeah, I think I've got everything. All right, so we'll right quit this. And now we should just be able to, oh, let me start the WireGuard config over here. Okay, so that started without any errors. And then to start it over here, we can actually do that as a regular user. So I'll just do sudo wg quick up wg test. Let's see, wg-test.conf does not exist. Oh, okay. So it actually does have to be in that WireGuard folder. That is interesting. I didn't know that. All right, so let's move, or actually I'll just copy test, wg test into there. Okay, and I should be able to just leave the keys alone. So now let's try it again. Okay, it looks like it connected. And let's just verify that real quick. And yes, we are able to ping out. And let's see, so you saw over here that, oh, my connection to this actually just dropped. Well, I guess I can show you guys here, since this hasn't dropped yet, so you can see my IP address for this VPN is 140.82.41.68. And sure enough, if I come over here and I do a curl ifconfig.me, you see that I am indeed using that IP address. And same thing if I were to check my IP like a normie. Go to what's my IP, and it tells me that I am, my ISP is Vultr Holdings. I've got this IP address, and my physical location is Luxembourg, something like that. Or no, this is, I think this is Belgium. It's displaying everything in some other language. But anyway, yeah, there you go. That's how you can set up your very own WireGuard VPN on OpenBSD. And my connection is dropped to this, but of course, I'm still connected to the internet. So I hope that you found this video useful for setting up your own WireGuard VPN on OpenBSD. If it was, be sure to leave a like and comment on this video to hack the algorithm. And subscribe to me on Odysee.com. I'm actually pretty close to reaching 40,000 followers there. So if you haven't already, make an account and subscribe to me. If you have an account already, subscribe to me on Odysee. And you can enjoy lots of good content from me and other content creators that is too-based for YouTube on Odysee.com. So go do that now and have a great day.